I think I'm going to start right now. Uh, my name is Igor, and I work as SDT for the last 5 years. Let me share my slides. And today we will talk about how to build internal tools with modern solutions. Uh, So I was mostly into different types of internal applications development, especially about infrastructure provisioning, infrastructure development, and stuff like that. And currently, I'm working at Supabase. I do all sorts of stuff around QA, automation, and SDET there. And I've built a few, maybe a couple 2 or 3 apps there as well to boost our productivity and ability to solve different tasks. So, what is the agenda for today? We will talk a little bit about why do we even need internal tools and how to build them using backend as a service solutions that there are in the market right now. And then we will have a small live building of an application with SvelteKit and Supabase. And at the end, I will show a real life working example built with Pocketbase for running performance tests in Supabase. And then we will have some time for Q&A sessions, some comments, and just a friendly discussion. So why do we even need internal apps today? The next slide, this one, actually answers this perfectly, I think, because it's fun to build, right? And the real reason I want to cover, so I'll go over a few examples I was working on during the last 5 years. And the first one is test automation system we were building at the company called Netrix. The idea there was the following. So we had an application that was responsible for security audit of corporate networks, IT departments, and stuff like that. It was a Windows application, a client server with a lot of agents installed on Windows server machines in all company network. It was monitoring file servers and a lot of different stuff. And our system was responsible for a part of CI pipeline after the application is built. Our automation system was receiving the binary of an app, and it was working with VMware vSphere to spin up isolated contexts with infrastructure to run tests in. So it was spinning up a few virtual machines on Windows, maybe some other stuff like file servers and different types of things. And then we shipped a few binaries for tests, test data there, run test, was gathering the results, so you can see so you can look through the results on the dashboard, understand what's broken, and well, just the CI pipeline, right? Um, Another example I was working on in another company that was a pretty huge and profitable fintech company was a message bus management platform. So the backend there was a microservices backend, and we had an internal development departure that was doing an infrastructure development there, and my department was responsible for the message bus. We built a custom message bus in C++ that could do events, message queues, and request response type of communication between microservices with really high throughput, so like millions of messages on the receivers, sub millisecond delivery time. Well, it was a pretty nice software. And to do service discovery and to manage contracts that can go between microservices, we used console as a data store from which message buses could read configurations. But it wasn't really efficient to configure everything through console, especially when we had like hundreds of developers who wanted to do that, and also to pass different audit checks. We had to implement some security things, like this service can accept to service use some contract of another service. You had to pass security checks from the security team, and um, uh, we made a platform, like a web app, basically, that could help you to configure your message bus, that could allow our security department to check if services are using only contracts they are allowed to use, and a lot of different things for managing like disaster recovery of message buses and other things with the message bus infrastructure. Another very small example I was doing, like I made literally in 1 week, when I saw that we had a big problem in another company that was actually a bank. And it was a very huge bank, and we had some issues with interviewing process. We wanted to do code interviews for SRE, for QA automation engineers, for SDET, and developers, when they not only write code, but also do some DevOps things. Like for SRE, it may be like spin up Kubernetes cluster, write some GitLab CI pipelines to manage this cluster as a code and stuff like that. And it wasn't, I think now it's sort of possible with Replit, but back then it wasn't possible with Replit. And we need to do this. And I created a small application that basically was going to Cloud API, trigger some routes, and um, create an isolated context with VMs, Docker, IDE that is accessible from the browser. It was based on Projector from IntelliJ IDEA, and you could collaborate on it in the CLI, create anything basically that you can on the normal VM or a set of VMs. And another app that I made in Supabase is a benchmarks app that allow you to manage code of performance tests, run these performance tests. It also spins up an infra to generate load, and you can see the history of all runs and compare them using Grafana. And yeah, a lot of other things you can do with the internal tools. Like you probably used a lot of admin CLIs, admin dashboards that are exclusive for internal use in your company, or maybe some custom A/B testing solutions that enable marketing team and analytics team to do some experiments without touching without connecting and creating tasks for developers, and infrastructure management as well, and a lot of things. So what are backend as a service solutions? Let's see on examples. The first one, Supabase, where I work right now. You can go to supabase.com, register there with GitHub, for example, and you will be able to create project there. Or you can also create the same project locally or in cloud using Docker Compose, Kubernetes, Supabase CLI as well, and a lot of different types. There are a lot of different ways to spin up Supabase project. And what is it? It allows you, it gives you Postgres database and a set of services on top of it to handle authentication and authorization, for example, go through in Supabase, real time to stream notifications and updates from your database directly, or to add multiplayer and collaboration features to apps, storage to use S3 or other file storage solutions, functions to add some JS code if you can do something with SQL. And another great thing is serverless APIs. Supabase provides GraphQL and REST API using Postgres. Um, so you don't need to write CRUD interfaces anymore for your app. It will be generated based on your schema based on your database schema. Another example is Pocketbase. It has less features than Supabase, but it is a Golang application. And if you want to write Golang code and you love writing a lot of Golang code, this is a nice option because it has framework mode, and you can import it in your existing Golang project. It will build on a single binary with front ends, for example, and it will have embedded SQLite database, and you can even store files on your local disk, for example. And all your app will be one binary and a set of static files somewhere stored, like SQLite and stores. And another one is Retool. It's also worth mentioning because it's like their marketing. They market themselves as um, build internal tools faster than ever, and it's really true. It more high level than Pocketbase and Supabase, but it allows you to generate dashboards on the front end, for example, using their components, and provides a lot of building blocks to do some boilerplate things even faster. So let's go to a quick demo right now. Let me check if there are any questions. No. Okay, let's jump into the demo, and we will build. Oops, sorry. We will build a small application for managing API schemas in the company. So imagine you want to have a single store for all API schemas like OpenAPI specs, Swagger, if you know it by that name, or like Kafka schemas, JSON RPC, protobufs, anything that you use, basically. Yeah, let me share my terminal. So we will use SvelteKit today. It is a nice platform, a nice framework that you can use to build front-end applications and to create Svelte project. You can use, you only need Node.js and npm installed, and you can run npm create Svelte latest and then your project name, and then you can use skeleton project, use TypeScript or JavaScript, what you like more. You can enable ESLint and Prettier from the start, and also add some testing in the bundle and create a project. Great, we have a project created. Next step, let's go and open our VS Code and take a look what's inside. I hope you can see my screen. So this is a simple SvelteKit project created from scratch, and now I suggest us to quickly jump to another thing and create a Supabase project. To do that, we need to go to supabase.com and do a sign in, and we can create a project. Let's create a Codementor project. Oops, sorry, I think I'm not sharing the right tab. Yeah, we need to create a new project. Select, choose some secure password for your database. And I'm currently in Turkey, so I'll select Europe as a data center. Now Supabase will spin up our project. And while it's happening, we can continue to develop our app. Let me quickly jump back to the VS Code. Great. So what we need to do next? We need to initialize Supabase. You need Supabase CLI for that. So you can do it with brew install Supabase if you're on macOS, or apt-get, or find any other types of installation in Supabase/Supabase CLI repo. So let's run Supabase init. It will create a folder Supabase in our repo with config to run Supabase locally, SQL, and so on. And we can also use Supabase login to log in by our user to authorize CLI to use Supabase. And then we can use Supabase link, and we need project ref that we just created in the Supabase. Let me quickly grab it. From the UI. Okay, so we need to link it. We can also specify the database password to push migrations that we will create locally directly to our project. So the next thing is we need a migration. To create a migration in Supabase, we need to run Supabase migration queue, and for example, init. This will create a migration folder and new migration file that we can later use. Let me quickly jump to another commit in this repo. Cool. So the first thing we need is a domains table. Why we need a domains table? To show how authorization would work. So we can think about domains, like, for example, we have different departments in our company, like auth, for example, that is responsible for user management, microservices for authentication, authorization, and stuff like that. And for example, we can have a processing department that is responsible for billing, orders, and stuff around this thing. And for example, R&D department that is responsible for looking for new technologies to use. So we are creating a domains table. We just create an ID column, name column, and it will be a name for a department, view, created it, updated it, and stuff like that. And we also enable row level security policy. And what is row level security? Row level security is a way to protect your data in Postgres or in other SQL databases. We can create a policy and allow access to domains only to authenticated users in Supabase. So you won't be able to use Postgres, for example, to query domains if you are not authenticated in the app. Next, let's add a table for relation with users and domains. As we said, the domains are sort of a department that's responsible for a couple of services maybe, and that can include some users. So we need a table to make this relation, to create this relation between users and domains. We are specifying user ID and domain ID here. Add foreign keys to domains and users table in the auth schema that is automatically created by go through in Supabase. And then we create row level security policies so users can see uh, only their domains. The next step is actually creating a specs table that will store our open API schemas or any other schemas that you will want to add there. So here we are creating name column to name our schema, description, version, so we can have multiple versions and not lost them. Schema URL is the URL for the storage where the actual schema will live. Domain ID, so the schema is the schema of some services API, and this service also belongs to some domain, so we have to have a domain here, and donor ID, the user who is responsible and who created the schema. Of course, we are creating foreign keys as well, and let's add RLS for this table as well. It will be a bit more complicated than before. We add update and delete policies for users so they can only modify or delete schemas that they own, so that they inserted in the database themselves. We add a policy for insert to check if the user who is adding the schema is the same one who is specified as owner, and that he specified domain that he has access to. And for select as well, that user can see only schemas from the domain he belongs to or domains. That's all with the schema now. We can push these changes to the database. And to do this, we just need to run a single command, Supabase db push, I think. Yep. And let's have a quick look into the database now. Let me share another window. So this is our Codementor project, and if you remember, I grabbed an ID from here to link this project to our code, and now we can go to table editor and find all our tables here: domains, specs, and user domains. Now let's create a few sample domains so we can use it later. For example, R&D, and we can add auth that would be responsible for our authentication and user management. Also, we will need a storage bucket to store actual schemas and specs. It will be private, so no one can see our specs. There are also additional configurations, so we can explicitly set types that this bucket can accept. And we need a few policies here as well, because this bucket is private. We can select from template, but we need a bit different one for select and insert. We need a policy that would allow users to see schemas that are in the folder with domain ID, starting with domain ID. So that we can allow users access only to schemas in their domain. Let's create a policy. And another small thing that we need to adjust here, there is a site URL that we need to change because our development server locally will be on port 5173, and if when you will move to production, you will set your prod URL or stage URL here. Okay, that's saved, and now we can return to code. Let's go back to the VS Code. And now we have to add Supabase to our Svelte project. To do that, we need to import a few packages. And also another thing that we can do is to generate types for our database schema. How to do this? We can do, I don't remember the command, I'm sorry. Yeah, Supabase gen types TypeScript. We also need project ID here. And we can specify a file where we want to put these generated types for TypeScript. Let's generate types, and we can see it here in the lib. Here it is. And so we can have a cool IntelliSense when you're working with the database. Yeah, and we need to do some imports installs for npm. We need to install Supabase, Supabase JS. This is a client library for Supabase. We also need to install auth helper SvelteKit to use authentication easier with SvelteKit and Supabase. And the last one is install auth UI Svelte and auth UI shared, so we can create a nice UI easier. I won't go too deep into the next step because it already covered in a nice guide. Let me share this guide with you guys. This is this one. So we have a blog post, a guide, how to build a user management app with SvelteKit. And I actually used this one to generate an authentication page and all the files that will be responsible for keeping the session up to date and to handle sign out from here. So you can go over this one and use it. I'll drop a link in chat right now so you can find it. And using this guide, I added an authentication to the project. Let's go back to the VS Code. Great. So what we have added here, we have added hooks.server.ts. We are importing from auth helper SvelteKit create Supabase server client, and we add two locals in SvelteKit, the Supabase client. So we can later use it to do authentication, to query data from our database or from storage. Also, we added some typings in app.dts. And of course, we added an auth component from auth UI Svelte to do authentication. Page server that actually is working with session, layout to pass state, and the page logging in as an intermediary when you are logging in. Let's run npm install and npm run. Take a look if something is actually happening. Let me share the opened window. And we have our app up and running. We can log in, for example. Oops. We have an issue because we didn't specify environment variables. How to do that? We need to go back to the VS Code and set environment variables here. So we have our project ref. Just a second. I can't find it. Yeah. We need our project ref here and unknown key that we can also grab from the dashboard. And now the server is restarted. And let me share it real quick. And send magic link. Magic link will be delivered to your email and you can use it to sign in. Yeah, we don't have any other routes, so we are getting 404, but we are already logged in into system. Let's add our first real page. Our first real page, we need to go back to the VS Code. And we see there that the code didn't find page schemas. Let's add a new route. Actually, the schemas route. We need to do this under the routes main folder. We can add schemas, and here are 2 pages. The first one is 2 files. Sorry. The first one is page svelte, which actually renders the schema list. We do some small tricks with the array of schemas that we receive from the server. So we are parsing and getting the domains to render per each domain a new list, and then we are rendering a list. We group schema by name to distinct versions. It is also possible if you will write SQL function, but it is not possible with Postgres out of the box, to display only the latest version of the schema in the list. And then we have a form to sign out from our app. And the interesting part here is in page.server.ts. So what we do here, we check if we have a session. If not, we will redirect back to the login page. And then we use Supabase client that is already authenticated to select from the table specs. We select ID, name, description, and other fields that are not deleted yet. And then we just return it to the page. So we can use it here, for example, as data schemas. Let's jump back to a lot of resharing again and again. We can share this page. Can refresh, and we see our page here now. We see here create new schema button, and obviously we didn't implement it yet. So this is our next step. Let's implement the schema new route. So we can create new schemas. Going back to VS Code. And we need to add another folder under the schema one. It will be the new folder. And in the new folder, we have a component upload to upload the schema file. You can find it in the same guide about user management, but there we upload an image. Then we are adding a page.svelte with the form. We are adding the form here. The email will be disabled. That's the owner of the schema. Then we can specify name, description for the schema, domain we can choose from R&D and auth that we specified earlier. And we use an upload component to actually upload the schema file. And again, the interesting part in the page server.ts file, where we parse the form data to get all these params from the form, and we insert it in the Supabase Postgres. How we do that? We just use Supabase client again, and from specs, we are selecting the version first, so we can increment it by one if we already have this schema. And then we insert the schema to the database using from specs that insert on the Supabase client. And note that we are using owner ID session user ID. So we are using user from the session as the owner. And if everything good, we are redirecting back to schemas. Let's try and use this new endpoint. Going back to our app. Refresh. Yeah, we have a schema now. It's not very beautiful. I didn't do a lot of styling here. So this is a schema. Let's R&D and upload a schema. I have prepared Swagger specs. Let's choose this one, for example. We see that file was uploading, and now we can hit the create button. And probably I messed something up. Not redirected back. Yes, I didn't mess anything up, but we can't insert because our user that we created is not in the domain R&D that we use here. To add this user to R&D domain, we have to return to our dashboard in the Supabase. And now we can select the table. Oh, wow. My internet is having a bad time. Yeah, so we have to go to user domains table and insert a new row to add a relation for a user that we created to the domain R&D, for example. Now we can save this and oh, sorry, you probably didn't see this, right? Sorry. Let me try this another time. So we should go to the user domains. Let me delete this row so I can repeat it for you again. We can insert the row here. We can select a user from here. We can find our user. We can find a domain R&D, for example, and we can save it. So now our user belongs to R&D domain. What does it mean? That we can go to our app again and try to upload it one more time. Yeah, and now we see that in our schema list, we have our schema. And now it would be really great to actually see this. And for that, we are heading back to our VS Code window again. We need the last page for today, page for schema details. Let's go and have a quick look over this page. So what we have here, we import HTML from Swagger HTML raw. That's an HTML file that imports few Swagger CSS and JS things to actually render your YAML and JSON open API schemas as nice Swagger HTML docs. we replace OpenAPI spec file with the schema URL from the database. How do we do this? We have an ID in the route, and we can take it in the page server.ts, like so in the params, and we can select from the database, from Supabase specs, where ID equal to ID, all the params. And then when we can use Supabase.storage to create a signed URL, which will be accessible to anyone for a short period of time from the specs bucket. And now let's return to our app. Let's return to our app. Yeah. We can go to our test v1. Oops, and we have some error. Let me take a look what's happened. The resource was not found. Create another one quickly. I don't really understand why. Test 2. Some description. RMB domain, and let's upload the schema. This one, for example. Okay, test 2. Yeah, probably I messed something up. The last one. Buggy as any software. And we can see our OpenAPI spec rendered fully with all the routes. It's interactive, and yeah, like so. So this can be a portal where your users, your employees can find all the schemas they have access to and see how they can use other services. Let's try to log in under other user real quick to see that he is not in the domain and he will not be able to see these schemas. Yeah, email just came here, and we don't see any schemas because this user is not in the domain. Let's go back to our slides. Of course, I will add the link to the GitHub repo with this project at the end. What can be our next iterations for this project? The first, maybe the main one, is to switch to SSO authentication. As you know, it's a really important thing for our security departments and companies to keep everything protected. And since the last launch week, just a week or two ago, we now allow you to enable SSO for your project in Supabase, both locally and hosted. We can add, for example, edge functions in Supabase to run some GitHub workflow and execute packed contract tests, so you will know that your latest schema changes are not affecting any other services that depend on you, and a lot of other things. Another small real world example that I was promising to you, I'll try to do it quick because I'm a bit of the schedule. Let me share another window. So I show this window. Sorry for that. That will be quick. So this app is Supabase Benchmarks. You can find it in GitHub repo, and it is actually a Pocketbase app. There are a full wiki about how to use it, except how to deploy it, but I will add it really soon. So we can jump to this app by ourselves if I find it somewhere here. So yeah, this is it. This is the front end of our application that is built with Pocketbase. You can see the full history of test runs for different projects here. And what it does, and also users can create a new executions, new launches for benchmarks that already exist here. And for a quick solution to add security, all the sensitive things are stored in the admin UI. There is a small difference in root with underscore to access admin of Pocketbase. And here we can create new projects. Project is just a service that you are testing. Create new benchmarks that are actual tests, load tests for these services. Add secrets to add some sensitive variables like API keys, or to add actual code of the load tests here, and Terraforms to set up configuration. So Terraform is a DSL to provide infra, and this app is just uh, storing Terraforms and K6 script to create load. And when it finds a new benchmark that needs to be run, uh, it unpacks Terraform scripts and K6 scripts, execute Terraform scripts to create few virtual machines in cloud that will generate load, sends K6 scripts to this machine via SSH and executes them. And then the scripts generate a load over for a system that we want to test, and send all the metrics and results to Prometheus or Victoria metrics, well, anything that you want, and you can see it in Grafana. And if you go back here, we can see that there are a lot of Grafana links that we can open and see how our app was doing during this run. So yeah, we are of the time. So this was a real quick demo. I can show a few interesting things here. So Pocketbase is much more like Golang-ish rather than SQL-ish. So if you like writing code in Go, this is probably a nice option for you. So this is how you create migrations here, for example. And some interesting models here, maybe like execution with a cron job that actually checks if there are any benchmarks that we need to run. And another maybe interesting thing is the web. You probably noticed that both dashboards look similar. This is because I just took the Pocketbase, which is open sourced Pocketbase web UI folder, stripped everything that wasn't necessary for the user's UI, and changed some routes, changed small styles like colors, and it became our uh, users UI, where users can just create new launches or take a look at the history. Let's go back to the Codementor. So this was the real world example, and instead of a conclusion, I just want to encourage you to use such tools as Supabase, Retool, Pocketbase, and well, any tools that you will find that are open source or that maybe are just cheap, and you can use them. Um, Also, that you don't have to be afraid of building. It's fun at first, of course, and also you don't have to build something beautiful from day one. I necessarily keep this example that we've built today really simple because I really built it in 1 hour or so. Um, Using all these guides, I will drop a few links in the chat right now where to find this blog posts and examples, how to enable SSO for your project on Supabase, links to Pocketbase, Retool, and everything. So yeah, just focus on things that are really matter, like taking a look at all open API schemas, and then add JSON RPC and protobuf, add an update button if you need it, add a delete button when the first developer in your company will come and say, hey, how to delete? I don't know, there are no button, and you will add it. Just iterate, build quick and dirty, And yeah, these things can save a lot of money also. Like this benchmarks app that I showed briefly at the end actually saved us a few $100,000 in less than a year now. If you will compare it with KSX Cloud, for example, that also can run load tests for you. So here are some links. Let me post it in chat real quick. Thank you everyone for coming and listening. And now let's jump to Q&A session. I'm really want to see it in your questions in the chat or to listen it out loud. Thank you. I received a few questions. Okay. How Natalia is asking, how much time did you spend to build this example? Oh, I just said it. It was 1 to 2 hours. And how do you estimate the time I will spend for a project like this if I have no experience in Supabase? I think if you have experience with databases in general, it would be relatively simple because I actually don't use Supabase client, for example, too often as well. But the main interactions is the similar with SQL. So if you know SQL, it will maybe took a couple 1, 2, 3 more hours uh, to dig into the Supabase to just get started. Is this possible to do from knowing Firebase only? Kit is asking, is it possible to do from knowing Firebase only? Yes, sure. Firebase is an amazing tool as well, and you can do all the similar stuff with Firebase, I think. I just prefer relational databases more, so this is why I'm choosing stuff like Retool, Supabase, Pocketbase. I just prefer open source, and I prefer SQL. The only thing, if you don't know the front end part, this example was really simple. I think for me, it was the first time I was using Svelte, by the way, as well, and it was really easy to get to know with Svelte and build this thing. And also, you send in LinkedIn link. I will definitely connect with you later. So I promised a few links. This one I already sent. This is the link to enabling SSO in Supabase. And this is the link to benchmarks repo, which was made with Pocketbase. Base and Retool. I'll wait another minute. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A or in the chat, or say it out loud.
I'm all set, but thank you and have a wonderful day.
Hey, thank you, Kid. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.